Fire.
Very quickly, sir, if you would, are you not at all concerned that by encouraging Israeli civilians to carry firearms, and I understand that there's conscription in Israel and they're better trained with firearms than just the average population in the average country, but are you not at all concerned that this could inflame tensions and make things even worse? And I cite for you an example of an Israeli stabbing another Israeli this week, thinking that that Israeli was an Arab, not that that would have excused it, and that's the kind of thing that might happen except with guns.
No, I'm not concerned. Look, I think that there's a mistake here. People are trying to project issues in the United States on Israel. Look, we have never, Jake, had a situation like you've had in these terrible incidents that you had in Sandy Hook or in Oregon just recently in Aurora. That, to my knowledge, has never happened in the history of the state of Israel. Not everyone in Israel can get a gun. You have to have a license. There are people who are trained, and we have a citizens army. There are a lot of people carrying guns. You've been to Israel. You know, when you go on the streets, there are a lot of people carrying guns. What's unique about Israel
is often in uniform.
You don't have it. And I have to tell you, we have saved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives because we have that citizen army, because people are on reserves and people are armed. And so when a terrorist goes and he stabs one or two people, they don't get to kill a third and a fourth, because by that time there's somebody there who's able to take action and stop them.
All right, Ambassador Dermer, thanks so much for being here.
All right, so in this video, again, Jake Tapper, who I despise, and one day soon will no longer post his videos, but I thought it was important for you to see that Israel is encouraging their citizens to be armed because they're in harm's way, because they're in a battle zone, which, you know, I don't understand why the politicians in our country seem to trust our citizens less with protecting their families, you know, getting their flock through the valley of the shadow of death, which is not where I live, you know. I live in a rainforest. People are chill. Although Seattle's not what it used to be. 9/11 changed everything, you know. You should have seen it before that. It was a place to be. Anyways, I digress. This is this encouraging, and the thing is, Jake Tapper, he says, oh, I know that the people that you're encouraging to take, you know, carry weapons are more trained than the average world citizen. Who I think he's talking about you. You don't know how to use your guns. You guys are inept and you're going to hurt somebody, not a bunch of people. But I thought it was important to see that. I don't know why they're not talking about sensible knife control policies now. We need sensible knife control in Israel. And I'm sorry to the people who have to go through something horrific like that. You know, when you see the knife attacks in China, you know why you want to have a gun. And they're brutal. I mean, like 100 people in a train station got like just fucking Chinese style. You know, those guys know how to use knives. So it's got to be horrifying, and I feel bad for you. I really do. Anyone who's wrapped up in this bullshit war-making crap, I feel horrible for it. It's got to stop. We have to evolve as a species beyond the need to make war. We have to do it quickly. And your cop haircuts aren't helping. That's all I'm saying. Stay cool. One of these days, war's going to end. You know, people like Jake Tapper and this douchebag aren't going to make it happen. It's up to you and me. And you know, I've been trying for a long time. Right? Thanks again.
Welcome back to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. Making headlines in our world lead today. Tensions running high in Israel and the Palestinian territories after a wave of terrorist stabbings by Palestinians have Israelis on edge, while the crackdown by Israeli forces is being accused of feeding further unrest. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas accused Israel of declaring open season on Palestinians. Israeli officials fired back, saying Abbas has done absolutely nothing to quell the deadly violence and in some cases has incited it. Let's get right to CNN international correspondent Phil Black. He's live in Jerusalem. Phil, what's the mood on the ground there tonight?
Jake, on the streets, there is real fear. It is tense. And from the Israeli government today, great anger. The Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke really forcefully, first rejecting, hitting back at a statement from the US State Department spokesman suggesting that Israel may be using excessive force. That, Netanyahu says, is absurd and unfair. But he's really angry with the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, who has said that Israeli forces are executing children. He says that that is the sort of statement that is inciting these attacks and only going to cause more of them, Jake.
And what type of additional security measures have been taken by Israel?
There's a really visible security presence on the streets. It is everywhere. In East Jerusalem, the Palestinian settlements, communities there, they are effectively locked down. We've had fortified checkpoints put in there that are really restricting who can come in and who can leave. The locals there are pretty angry about that, but the government believes it is a necessary and reasonable step to take. And Israeli citizens themselves, those who legally own weapons, are being encouraged to carry them in the streets. Now, the government makes the point that because of compulsory military service here, Israelis know how to handle weapons safely and, when necessary, effectively too. But it really shows what a challenge it is here to police and to stop these very sudden, random attacks against people in the streets involving knives and other cutting implements, Jack.
All right, Phil Black in Israel, thank you so much. Joining me now is Israeli Ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer. Ambassador Dermer, thanks so much for being here. We were just talking about Israeli officials and Palestinian officials trading accusations, but specifically Israeli officials saying that Mahmoud Abbas, head of the Palestinian Authority, is inciting violence. And you brought some posters that Prime Minister Netanyahu also held up at a press conference. What are they?
Yeah, well, this is a poster of one of the people who stabbed, this particular person stabbed 3 Israelis. And the point that I want to make is that this is a poster that is being spread all over Palestinian areas, and that's the president of the Palestinian Authority, Abbas, and there's Arafat. This is not Hamas. This is the Palestinian Authority, and what they're doing, Jake, is they're glorifying these people as heroes. Until today, President Abbas has not actually condemned a single terror attack.
But how are you sure that that's from the Palestinian Authority and not just somebody who made a poster?
No. Look, the head of the Palestinian Authority went on television yesterday. He accused Israel of executing an innocent boy. First of all, the person is not dead. The boy is actually in an Israeli hospital. Second of all, it's not an innocent person. What you're talking about is somebody who was stabbing a 13-year-old Jewish boy in Jerusalem, stabbing him multiple times. You had a 15 and a 13-year-old, 2 teenagers with knives going around stabbing people. These are not innocent civilians that all of a sudden Israel is opening fire against. These are people who are trying to kill. And fortunately, we've been able to stop a lot of those attacks. We haven't been perfect, and that's why we have 8 Israelis who have died.
The U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby had this to say about Israel yesterday.
We've certainly seen some reports of what many would consider excessive use of force. Obviously, we don't like to see that.
Excessive force. Now, Kirby tried to walk that back today.
I think he did more than try. I think he made it clear that we're not suggesting that Israel's used excessive force in fighting against these terror attacks. So I don't know specifically what he was talking about yesterday and today. You'd have to ask him. But we're not using excessive force. We have a major problem. We have attacks throughout the country. We've had 8 Israelis who've been murdered. Unfortunately, we have had some success in preventing some of these attacks, but not enough, and we have to continue to be vigilant.
Now, these seem to be lone wolf attacks, not perpetrated by Hamas or Islamic Jihad terrorist groups, as you yourself are suggesting. Now, I would never do anything to excuse violence, but how do you respond to those who say these young people are hopeless and the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority could do something more to erase that hopelessness? Again, just to underline, I'm not excusing any violence.
I understand, but people have to understand. Those people who think that it's despair that drives terror, hopelessness, are clueless. They actually don't understand what drives terrorism. There are a lot of conflicts, Jake, around the world. A lot of political, social, national conflict. Why in this conflict do you have people taking guns and knives and killing civilians? That doesn't happen in many places around the world. You know, you've had an occupation of Cyprus for over 40 years. Why don't you have Cypriots going around and taking knives and just killing people in the streets? I'll tell you why. Because when they're raised from 2, 3, 4 years old, they're not put in an education system where they celebrate and glorify killers. That is what's happening in Palestinian society. They're creating a Palestinian generation, level after level, in their education system, through their media, through kindergarten camps where they teach people to wear suicide vests, and where they glorify killers. They have public squares in Palestinian areas named after mass murderers. Who are the heroes of Palestinian society? In America, who are the heroes? If people want to grow up to be a doctor, they want to grow up to be a firefighter, they want to grow up to be an athlete, maybe they want to be in Hollywood. In Palestinian areas, the heroes are killers. And who is responsible for that? The leadership of the Palestinians have to take a clear stand against terrorism. And instead of actually dousing the flames, they're pouring more and more fuel on the fire.
Very quickly, sir, if you would, are you not at all concerned that by encouraging Israeli civilians to carry firearms, and I understand that there's conscription in Israel and they're better trained with firearms than just the average population in the average country, but are you not at all concerned that this could inflame tensions and make things even worse? And I cite for you an example of an Israeli stabbing another Israeli this week, thinking that that Israeli was an Arab, not that that would have excused it, and that's the kind of thing that might happen except with guns.
No, I'm not concerned. Look, I think that there's a mistake here. People are trying to project issues in the United States on Israel. Look, we have never, Jake, had a situation like you've had in these terrible incidents that you had in Sandy Hook or in Oregon just recently, in Aurora. That, to my knowledge, has never happened in the history of the state of Israel. Not everyone in Israel can get a gun. You have to have a license. There are people who are trained, and we have a citizens army. There are a lot of people carrying guns. You've been to Israel. You know, when you go on the streets, there are a lot of people carrying guns. What's unique about Israel
is often in uniform.
You don't have it. And I have to tell you, we have saved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives because we have that citizen army, because people are on reserves and people are armed. And so when a terrorist goes and he stabs 1 or 2 people, they don't get to kill a third and a fourth, because by that time there's somebody there who's able to take action and stop them.
All right, Ambassador Dermer, thanks so much for being here. I hope
Thank
there's
you.
peace in the region soon. When we come back,
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.